domestically now, we've seen lawmakers late today vote to subpoena the Attorney General for the way her department has handled the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. You saw a handful of Republicans, right, so people in the president's own party, joining Democrats on the House Oversight Committee to vote to bring Pam Bondi in, including Nancy Mace, the congresswoman on the Republican side. Watch this.
I have a lot more questions, and I don't expect to be talking about the stock market. So she better not bring those notes when she comes to the Oversight Committee.
That's a reference to the previous questioning that Bondi went through just some weeks ago in front of a different House committee on this very thing, where you see here survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse stood. They were in the audience. They were wearing shirts that talked about releasing the files. Let me bring in Ryan Nobles, who's live for us on Capitol Hill. So this is interesting. This is a real sort of shot across the bow to the White House, to the Department of Justice, that they're subpoenaing now Pam Bondi. Ryan.
Yeah, and it's really born out of a sense of frustration from the members of Congress who are specifically interested.
Today, lawmakers escalated the Epstein controversy by voting to subpoena the Attorney General over the Department of Justice's handling of the case. What stood out even more was that some Republicans, including Nancy Mace, joined Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, showing that frustration over accountability is spreading across party lines. Mace made that frustration clear. She said she still has many questions and mocked Pam Bondi, warning her not to arrive with stock market notes, a sharp reference to Bondi's earlier appearance before a committee where Epstein survivors demanded the release of the files. This vote feels like a direct warning to the White House and the Justice Department. It reflects growing anger in Congress and fits a larger pattern that keeps repeating itself. Hidden documents eventually come out, no matter how much resistance there is from the executive branch. That pattern has become central to the Trump accountability story. Whether it is the Epstein files or the classified documents tied to Mar-a-Lago, the same cycle keeps unfolding. Records stay buried until court orders, legal pressure, and public scrutiny finally force them into the open. Under mounting pressure from Congress, the Justice Department has already released millions of pages tied to Epstein, helped by the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was designed to break through executive resistance. Across those files, Trump's name reportedly appears more than 1,000 times. The broader issue is accountability. Congress has kept pressing for records, while the administration has repeatedly fought over deadlines and disclosure. A contempt report found that the failure to comply was intentional, not accidental, and lawmakers in both parties described the missing records as an effort to avoid transparency requirements. Then came the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the most dramatic accountability clash of Trump's second term. The FBI executed a search warrant, investigators found footage of boxes being moved after a subpoena, and special counsel Jack Smith concluded there was enough evidence to support obstruction. Taken together, the picture is hard to ignore. Repeated references to Trump in the Epstein files, a formal finding of intentional noncompliance, footage of boxes being moved, and a special counsel arguing the evidence could support conviction. By late 2025, around 140 House members had voted to advance impeachment articles tied to that broader pattern of concealment and defiance. So this is not just one shocking event, it is a growing chain of disclosures, and each new release adds more weight to the accountability case. The contempt proceedings, impeachment push, and document battles are all part of the same unfolding story, and it is still far from over.
The chair of the House Oversight Committee has issued a subpoena for Attorney General Pam Bondi to appear for a deposition next month. Republican Congressman James Comer of Kentucky saying that his panel is investigating, quote, possible mismanagement of the federal government investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. A DOJ spokesperson calling the subpoena unnecessary. It's unclear if Bondi will comply.
What really matters in this hidden documents story is the pattern. Every time new records are forced into the open, the political fallout grows instead of fading. And that makes the damage far greater than any single disclosure on its own. We have seen the same cycle again and again. First, there is resistance. Then legal or congressional pressure forces a partial release. And once those documents appear, they often reveal something more damaging than the reason given for keeping them hidden in the first place. That is what happened with the Ukraine call memo, the Mar-a-Lago classified documents, and the Epstein files. Different cases, same pattern. That is why this has become such a serious accountability issue. Trump publicly signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, presenting himself as supportive of disclosure. but behind the scenes, his administration reportedly fought over deadlines, redactions, and production. That contradiction, public promises on one side and private resistance on the other, is exactly what made the contempt findings so politically dangerous. The two biggest parts of this story are the Epstein files and the Mar-a-Lago documents. Together, they create a much larger picture of concealment. In the Epstein matter, millions of pages were released only after Congress pushed back against executive resistance. Those disclosures reportedly included thousands of references to Trump, while later reporting and oversight findings suggested that important records had still been withheld. Each new wave of documents only added to the sense that the earlier resistance was about protecting damaging information, not legitimate confidentiality. The Mar-a-Lago case is even more direct. There, the evidence record is much more detailed. Investigators reportedly found surveillance footage showing boxes being moved after a subpoena had been issued. There were also notes and witness accounts describing conversations and actions tied to hiding documents, along with testimony about attempts to erase surveillance footage. On their own, each piece is significant. Together, they form a much more powerful picture of deliberate concealment and obstruction. That is why this case carries so much weight. Video evidence can be explained away, notes can be attacked, witnesses can be challenged. But when footage, professional notes, and witness testimony all point in the same direction, it becomes far harder to dismiss. That is the kind of combined record that gives prosecutors confidence and turns a political scandal into a much more serious accountability threat. And that threat is already showing up institutionally. The impeachment votes, the bipartisan contempt proceedings, and the growing pressure from Congress all reflect that this is no longer being treated as an isolated controversy. It is being viewed as part of a larger documented pattern. Even some Republicans have crossed party lines, which shows that the reaction is not purely partisan. It is rooted in the record itself. What makes this story even more dangerous politically is that it may not be over. More disclosures could still come from the Epstein subpoena fight, from grand jury material connected to the classified documents case, from Georgia-related testimony, or from further investigative reporting that exposes new gaps in what has already been released. Every new release has the potential to deepen the same pattern rather than disrupt it. So the big takeaway is simple. This is not just about one hidden memo or one dramatic raid. It is about a repeated cycle of concealment, forced disclosure, and escalating fallout. The Ukraine memo, the Epstein files, and the Mar-a-Lago documents all point in the same direction. And with every new wave of records, the accountability case grows heavier, not weaker.
President Donald Trump said that Karg Island, the site of critical Iranian oil infrastructure, has been totally demolished by US bombing, as he claimed that Iran wanted to negotiate a ceasefire. During a call with NBC News on Saturday, Trump boasted that the US military totally demolished the island, adding that we may hit it a few more times just for fun. According to the Pentagon, the US military used $11.3 billion worth of ammunitions in the first week of the war in Iran.
Today, President Donald Trump made sweeping claims about KG Island, a key hub for Iran's oil operations, saying U.S. bombing had completely destroyed it and even suggesting Iran now wants to discuss a ceasefire. Speaking to NBC News on Saturday, Trump sounded triumphant. He claimed the military had wiped the island out and even hinted it could be hit again. But this is what a war looks like when there is no real exit strategy. One day the president says the conflict could be over soon. 3 days later, he says it will end whenever he decides. Then, almost immediately, he admits the conditions still are not right for a deal. At the same time, the defense secretary is warning that the conflict is only beginning, while Trump is already declaring victory. That contradiction is hard to ignore. It becomes even harder when administration officials add more confusion, like the energy secretary posting that the Navy had escorted an oil tanker through the Strait of Hormuz, only to delete it when it turned out not to be true. And the economic reality is getting harder to spin. Oil prices have surged more than 40% since the war began. The strait remains effectively shut down, and the administration keeps telling the public the pain will be temporary, without offering any real timeline for relief. That is a very different picture from the optimistic story being pushed from the top. Now we are on day 15 of what was supposed to be a fast, controlled conflict, but the gap between the administration's message and the reality on the ground has become so wide that even Trump's own supporters are struggling to follow it. This war with Iran is nowhere near as close to ending as Trump keeps suggesting, and if it stretches into the spring and summer, the political and economic consequences could be massive. That is the real issue. Most people still do not fully understand how the situation escalated to this point or where it may be headed next.
Trump also told NBC News in a 30-minute telephone interview that Iran wanted to negotiate a ceasefire, but said that he had not agreed because the terms aren't good enough yet. He did not give details on the supposed offer or what he would consider acceptable, except to say that any deal needed to be very solid and would involve Iran committing not to build a nuclear weapon. The president also questioned whether Iran's new supreme leader is even alive, and said he was surprised that Iran had attacked its neighbors in the wake of a joint US-Israeli bombing campaign. He has called for other countries, including the UK, France and Japan, to send ships to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for oil trade.
Trump says Iran wants a deal, but not on terms he is willing to accept, and that may be the clearest sign yet that this war is nowhere near over. According to the latest reporting, the administration has rejected attempts by Middle Eastern allies to open diplomatic talks, even as Iran insists there can be no ceasefire unless US and Israeli strikes stop completely. At the same time, Trump is telling the public that Iran wants peace, that America is winning, and that the conflict could end whenever he decides. But those claims are colliding with a very different reality. 15 days into what was supposed to be a short, controlled operation, the war is expanding instead of winding down. The military picture is far more complicated than the White House keeps suggesting. Yes, US and Israeli strikes have done real damage to Iran's infrastructure and capabilities, but Iran has not been broken in any meaningful sense. The Revolutionary Guard remains active, the Strait of Hormuz is still effectively closed, and American officials are now bracing for more weeks of strikes rather than an imminent end. That matters because the Strait of Hormuz is the center of everything. It is the pressure point connecting the military conflict to the global economy and to Trump's political future. Before the war, dozens of tankers moved through that route every day. Now commercial traffic has nearly collapsed, helping drive oil prices sharply higher and tightening global supply. The administration keeps saying the pain will be temporary, but it still has not shown a credible path to reopening the strait or ending the crisis. That is where the economic danger becomes impossible to ignore. Oil prices have jumped dramatically since the fighting began, and the effects are spreading well beyond fuel. Shipping, food, and global supply chains are all feeling the strain. The White House appears deeply aware of the political risk. One telling example came when Energy Secretary Wright posted that the Navy had escorted a tanker through the strait, only for the claim to be deleted after it proved untrue. Even the press secretary later confirmed the escort had not happened. That moment said a lot. It showed just how anxious the administration has become about the market and the optics. The diplomatic picture is just as grim. Regional mediators including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Oman have tried to open channels, but the administration has reportedly resisted those efforts. Iran, meanwhile, is demanding compensation, guarantees against future attacks, and a full halt to strikes before it will even consider talks. Its leaders have made clear they see the closure of the strait as leverage, and they are not eager to surrender it. So while Trump talks publicly about a possible deal, the actual gap between both sides still looks enormous. And then there is the political fallout at home. Polling now suggests the war is becoming a serious drag on Trump's standing, especially on the economy and his handling of Iran. Independent voters are turning away, public confidence in his strategy is weak, and the administration's credibility is being damaged by its own contradictions. In the span of a single week, Trump has said the war would end soon, that it would end whenever he wants, and that the terms for ending it are still not good enough. Those are not signs of a coherent strategy. They are signs of a message slipping out of alignment with events on the ground. That credibility problem only grows worse as time passes. Every promised turning point that fails to arrive makes the administration's optimism look less convincing. If the war is still dragging into summer, if oil remains high, and if there is still no clear exit, the political consequences heading into the midterms could become severe. There is also a deeper structural problem here. The war is moving closer to the point where Congress may demand a direct role under the War Powers Resolution. That means the administration may soon face not only military and economic pressure, but constitutional and political pressure from Capitol Hill as well. And with parts of the Republican coalition already uneasy about an open-ended foreign conflict, that pressure could grow quickly. So this is the real state of the war right now. Militarily, it is unresolved. Economically, it is hurting. Diplomatically, it is stuck. Politically, it is getting more dangerous for the White House by the day. Trump may say Iran wants a deal. He may say victory is already in hand. But until there is either a real military breakthrough or a negotiated settlement both sides can accept, this conflict is not ending. The strait stays closed, oil stays high, casualties keep rising, and the pressure keeps building.